In Mavuko, the night felt soft, but inside the small house, something sharp was breaking. Imani and her mother Rasha had started arguing over a tiny thing, something so small that later neither of them would remember what it was. Voices rose too quickly. Hurtful words slipped out before anyone could catch them. Then Rasha said the one thing Imani never thought she would hear. She told her to leave. The room went quiet in a way that made the world feel wrong. Imani grabbed her bag even though her hands were shaking. She stepped outside and tried to look strong while her chest felt tight. The street was empty, yet she could feel the neighbors watching from behind their curtains. She walked anyway, eyes burning, heart pulling her in two directions at once. At the corner near the old fig tree she stopped. The night breeze cooled her face, but it didn't touch the ache inside her. She kept remembering the soft things. Rasha teaching her to braid her hair, Rasha laughing so hard she had to hold her stomach, Rasha whispering comfort on nights when the world felt too heavy. Back in the house, Rasha stood alone, the anger already gone, replaced by a sudden fear. She felt the silence like a weight and reached for her phone with trembling fingers. When Imani answered, neither spoke at first, but something gentle cracked open between them. Imani turned around and hurried home, half crying, half laughing at herself. Before she reached the gate, Rasha ran out barefoot and pulled her clothes. The hug felt like breathing again after holding it for too long. That night they sat together over warm tea, talking softly until the pain loosened. Somehow the fight didn't break them. It showed them just how much they still belonged to each other. Imani stepped out of the house in Mavuko with her small bag pressed close to her side, trying to walk like someone who had everything under control. Inside, she felt like her ribs were shaking. She was angry, yes, but the anger sat on top of something softer, something that stung more than she wanted to admit. The street was quiet except for the hum of distant traffic, yet she felt eyes on her. Curtains shifted. A porch light flicked on. People always sensed trouble even when no one announced it. Imani kept her head high and walked toward the road, telling herself she didn't care, though her vision blurred with the tears she refused to let fall. Each step felt strange, like she was walking away from more than a house. She passed the old houses of Mavuko, the ones with cracked paint and flowering trees that leaned toward the street. They had watched her grow up, watched her run to school with her braids bouncing, watched her come home tired but smiling. Tonight they watched something else. A daughter trying to act brave after hearing something she never should have heard from the one person who had raised her alone. She reached the corner by the tamarind tree and stopped. The tree had always been her quiet place, the one spot where she used to sit with her childhood friend Jabari and share stories about school, dreams, random silly things. She leaned against the trunk now and let the cool night air settle on her face. She closed her eyes and tried to breathe. Her mother's voice kept replaying in her head, not the angry voice from a few minutes ago, but all the other versions. The gentle one that taught her to tie her laces, the tired one that sang her to sleep after long shifts at the clinic in Indalizo, the warm one that called her my son whenever she felt small. Imani pressed a hand to her forehead. How could one harsh moment erase all that softness? But it didn't really erase it. It only made everything heavier. She pushed herself away from the tree and started walking again, heading nowhere in particular. The streetlights cast long shadows on the road, and her own shadow looked like someone older, someone she wasn't ready to be. She felt embarrassed that the neighbors had seen her leave, embarrassed that she was crying over something that had started as a tiny spark. She let out a shaky laugh, the kind that almost breaks into a sob. She didn't know if she was laughing at herself, at the situation, or at the fact that she still hoped her mother would call. She imagined Rasha pacing the living room, regret seeping in slowly, the way it always did after big arguments. Imani loved her mother with a kind of loyalty that lived deep in her bones, and that love made everything hurt more. She reached the small footbridge over the dry stream that led toward Ingalave Market and sat on the low wall. The world was calm, as if nothing unusual had happened. She listened to the chirping insects, the whisper of a passing motorbike, the distant sound of a radio playing from someone's yard. Little by little her anger softened. Underneath it she found fear, and under that she found longing. She wanted home, even if home was the very place she had run from minutes earlier. She wanted her mother's arms. She wanted the familiar smell of cardamom tea. She wanted to undo the last hour. She placed her bag beside her and wiped her cheeks with the back of her hand, wishing the night could tell her what to do. But the night stayed quiet, waiting for her to make the next move. Imani slowed down when she reached the corner near the old tamarind tree of Mavuko Heights, the same place she had passed almost every day of her life. Tonight it felt different. The branches hung low and still, like they were watching her. She leaned her back against the rough trunk and let the night air cool her face. It helped a little, but not enough to soften the hollow ache inside her. She whispered to herself that she was fine, that she didn't care, that she would sleep at her cousin's place in Latali if she had to. But even as she said it, she felt her throat tighten. It was strange how the world could be so quiet while her thoughts were so loud. A motorbike buzzed by, followed by a wave of silence that made her feel too alone. She hugged her arms around herself and tried to breathe the way her mother had taught her when she was younger, slow and steady, like the tide rolling in at the shore of Lake Nyasa. The memory of those lessons made her lips curl into a small smile that faded almost as quickly as it came. She found herself thinking of so many things at once. She remembered Rasha showing her how to braid her hair in the tiny kitchen of their old place in Dumanza, both of them laughing because Imani kept messing up the pattern. She remembered the afternoon they danced in the living room with no music, only the sound of rain hitting the roof. She remembered the nights her mother wrapped her in a blanket and held her close when she woke trembling from bad dreams. All those moments rose up now, uninvited and sharp, making her chest burn in a different way. A tear escaped before she could stop it. She brushed it away quickly, annoyed with herself, as if crying made her weak. But the truth sat stubborn in her chest. She missed her mother, even though she had left only minutes ago. She tried to stand tall, but her legs felt like they belonged to someone much smaller. A small breeze passed through the leaves and she laughed softly, almost in surprise, because she thought for a second it felt like a hand on her shoulder. She imagined what her mother was doing now. Maybe Rasha was pacing the living room, replaying the argument the same way Imani was. Maybe she was sitting on the edge of the sofa, staring at the door with regret gathering faster than she wanted to admit. Imani knew her mother. She knew the way guilt settled in Rasha's stomach when she lost her temper. She knew the way her mother's love didn't disappear even when her words came out too harsh. The hollow feeling inside her shifted, becoming heavy instead of empty. Imani stepped away from the tree and stared down the road, the long curve that led back to the house she knew better than she knew herself. Part of her wanted to keep walking, to prove she was strong enough to stay mad. But another part, the part she didn't want to listen to, whispered that home was still home. She wiped her face with both hands and let out a shaky breath. The silence around her didn't feel so loud anymore. It felt like a question, and she knew she would have to answer it soon. Rasha stood in the middle of the quiet living room in Ngalani, staring at the door that had closed behind her daughter only moments ago. The silence felt strange, like the whole house was holding its breath. Her anger, which had burst out so quickly, faded just as fast and left a cold panic in its place. She pressed her hand against her mouth as if she could pull the words back in. She thought she had been teaching Imani strength, but all she had done was let her frustration speak louder than her love. The room looked the same as always, the small sofa, the basket of folded laundry, the clean dishes drying on the rack, yet everything felt wrong. She walked to the window and pushed the curtain aside, hoping to catch a glimpse of Imani still on the path, but the road was empty. That emptiness hit her hard. It reminded her of the day she lost her husband Kino, the day she learned what it meant to hold a home together with nothing but her own hands and a child who needed her for everything. She remembered nights in their tiny flat in Old Ngalani when Imani was a toddler, the way she clung to Rasha's shirt while they cooked simple meals. The way she giggled when Rasha used wooden spoons like puppets just to make her smile. Her thoughts jumped through the years like scattered pictures. Imani on her first day at Tawala Primary, gripping her backpack straps with nervous excitement. Imani sitting at the kitchen table, tongue between her teeth, learning to braid her own hair while Rasha guided her with gentle fingers. Imani running into her arms after school with stories that tumbled out faster than words could form. All these memories rushed through her mind now, bright and painful. She sank onto the sofa and buried her face in her hands, feeling a tight ache in her chest. She had raised this girl alone, carried her through storms that no one else saw, held her when the world turned heavy. How had she let a small argument push her into saying something so sharp, something she didn't even mean? She could almost hear Imani's footsteps from years ago, the soft patter of a child running through the house. The quiet now felt like a betrayal. She got up again and paced, her hands shaking. She pictured Imani walking alone in the night, trying to act strong while her heart must be hurting. The thought made Rasha press her palm to her chest as if she could steady her heartbeat. She whispered her daughter's name into the empty room, the sound trembling. She knew she had to reach her and not later, not after pride cooled. Now. She grabbed her phone from the table and stared at the screen for a moment, feeling the weight of every mistake she had ever made as a mother squeeze her throat. Then she pressed call, hoping the ring would be answered, hoping it wasn't too late to pull her daughter back home where she belonged. Rasha held the phone with both hands as if it were something fragile, something that could slip away if she didn't grip it tight enough. Her fingers trembled while she searched for Imani's name on the screen, and for a moment she could barely breathe. When the call finally went through, the ringing felt like it echoed through the whole house, bouncing off the walls, reminding her of every second her daughter had been gone. Imani picked up on the fourth ring, and her voice came out stiff, almost formal, like she was trying to build a wall with every syllable. Hearing her speak like that made Rasha close her eyes. They both stayed silent for a moment, as if neither knew how to begin. Rasha tried to swallow the knot in her throat, but it only grew bigger, and then something inside her cracked open. Her words came out soft and shaking. She told Imani she was sorry, truly sorry, that she should never have said those things, not even in anger, not even for a second. She said it with a tremble that made the apology feel raw and real, the kind that pulls pride apart without asking permission. Imani listened with her heart beating fast. She had walked all the way to the footbridge at Tenzi Lane, trying to convince herself she was still angry, still justified. But the moment she heard the break in her mother's voice, something warm and painful spread through her chest. She remembered how they used to sit by the window during storms, Rasha's arm around her, whispering that no matter what, they were a team. She remembered the times her mother stood up for her at school, the time she worked extra hours in Ngalani just to buy her new shoes for the term. All of it rushed back in a wave that melted her anger faster than she expected. She pressed her free hand against her eyes, trying to blink away the tears before they escaped. She didn't want her voice to shake, but it did anyway when she finally spoke. She told Rasha she shouldn't have yelled either, that it wasn't fair, that she said things she regretted too. The honesty surprised them both. It felt like opening a window after a long night of holding everything inside. For a moment they simply breathed together through the phone. The world around Imani seemed to soften. Even the streetlights looked less sharp. She let out a small shaky laugh, the kind that comes from relief, and Rasha answered with a quiet one of her own, like two people remembering they still belong to the same life. Rasha asked where she was, her voice steadier now but laced with worry. When Imani told her, she could almost hear her mother moving quickly, grabbing her scarf, heading for the door. The call ended with a promise, not spoken loudly but understood deeply. Neither wanted this distance to last another second. Imani took a long breath, wiped her cheeks, and turned back toward home, her footsteps lighter than before. Imani turned around so quickly she almost stumbled, but she caught herself and began walking fast, then faster, until her steps felt like they were chasing the rhythm of her own heartbeat. The streetlights along Tenzi Lane stretched into long, glowing shapes as she moved, and her eyes kept filling with tears that she brushed away with the back of her hand. She wasn't sure if she was crying because she was relieved or because she felt foolish for walking away in the first place, and at some point she let out a strange laugh that cracked in the middle. It felt ridiculous, walking back like this, but it also felt right in a way that warmed her chest. She didn't want space. She didn't want the cold night or the empty road. She wanted home, no matter how noisy or imperfect. She wanted her mother, even if the day had ended in shouting. She knew love could be messy, but it was still the safest place she had ever known. The closer she got to Mavuko Heights, the quicker her steps became, almost like her body was afraid her mind would change if she didn't hurry. She passed the old tamarind tree again and didn't stop this time. The breeze carried a faint smell of dust and roasted maize from a nearby stall, a smell that reminded her of evenings spent wandering the neighborhood with Rasha, sharing one cob between them because money had been tight but laughter had been free. She could see the path leading to their house now, the faint glow from the single porch light spilling across the gate. Her stomach tightened when she imagined her mother pacing inside. She pictured Rasha wiping her eyes with the sleeve of her scarf, muttering to herself the way she did when she felt guilty. The thought made Imani's feet move even faster, as if she needed to erase the distance before it grew into something larger and harder to return from. She remembered moments from childhood, tiny ones she hadn't thought about in years. Rasha blowing cool air on her scraped knee. Rasha tying a ribbon around her hair for her standard 7 graduation. Rasha falling asleep on the couch after long shifts at the clinic in Indalani, her hand still holding Imani's homework notebook. All these memories filled her with warmth that pushed away the last bit of anger hiding inside her. The road curved gently, and the house came into full view. Her heart thudded so loudly she wondered if anyone could hear it. She didn't know what she would say when she reached the door, didn't know if the words would come out smooth or tangled. But she did know this walk back felt like stepping toward the truest part of herself. The night air cooled her wet cheeks and she breathed in deeply. She didn't want pride. She didn't want silence. She wanted the hug that could fix what shouting had broken. She wanted the familiar smell of home, the sound of her mother whispering her name the way only she could. So she kept going, almost running now, hoping her mother would open the door before she reached it, hoping they could both fall into the kind of forgiveness that felt like coming up for air after being underwater too long. Imani was still a few houses away when she saw the front door swing open, and for a second she wondered if she was imagining it. But then Rasha stepped into the light, barefoot, her scarf half falling off her shoulder, her breath visible in the cool night air. She didn't even pause to lock the door. She just ran. It wasn't graceful. It wasn't slow or careful. It was the kind of run someone makes when the fear of losing a person is bigger than pride, bigger than anger, bigger than all the small mistakes that led to this moment. Imani stopped walking, her chest tightening, and before she could call out, her mother reached her. They collided with an embrace so tight and sudden that Imani felt the world tilt. It felt like breathing after holding her breath for too long. The warmth of her mother's arms pushed away the night, and for a moment everything else disappeared. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. Rasha's hand cupped the back of Imani's head the way she used to when Imani scraped her knee as a child. Imani's fingers clung to the back of her mother's shirt, as if steadying herself from a fall that had lasted all evening. Rasha pulled back just enough to look at her eyes shiny and tired, but full of something soft and fierce. She touched Imani's cheek with trembling fingers, the touch so gentle it almost broke Imani's heart. Imani let out a shaky laugh that sounded more like a sob, and Rasha gave a short, breathless laugh of her own, the kind that comes from relief too heavy to carry quietly. They stood there on the path between the houses, under the dim streetlight that flickered like it wasn't sure if it should stay on, holding onto each other while everything inside them slowly settled. The street was silent except for a distant radio and the rustle of leaves, but it felt like the whole neighborhood was watching, not in judgment, but in a quiet understanding. Rasha murmured Imani's name just once, and Imani closed her eyes, feeling every bit of guilt, love, fear, and gratitude swirl inside her at once. Her mother smelled like faint lavender and the warm steam of boiling tea, a smell that had always felt like home. She didn't want to let go, and for a moment she didn't have to. When they finally eased apart, they stayed close, their foreheads almost touching. Rasha wrapped an arm around Imani's shoulders and guided her back toward the house with slow steps, as if afraid she might disappear again if she moved too quickly. As they walked, Imani felt the tight knot in her chest begin to soften. Everything still hurt, but the pain felt lighter now, shared instead of carried alone. The night air brushed against their skin, cool and forgiving. They reached the door together, and when Rasha whispered, "Come home," it wasn't a command or a plea. It was a promise, steady and warm, one both of them were ready to keep. They moved through the doorway quietly, almost shy, as if they were entering a place they had to learn all over again. The kitchen in Ngalani felt warmer than the rest of the house, the kind of warm that settles around you like a blanket. Rasha set water to boil even though her hands were still trembling a little, and Imani sat down at the small wooden table, tracing the grain with her finger the way she used to when she was younger. When the tea was ready, they both wrapped their palms around the cups as if holding something steady. For a while they didn't talk. They just breathed the same air, letting the soft steam rise between them. Then the words began to come, not in speeches but in small broken pieces. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. I was tired. I was scared. I shouldn't have said that." Their voices were gentle, their eyes sometimes wet, sometimes quietly amused at how dramatic the evening had become. There were moments when they both laughed under their breaths, the kind of small, embarrassed laughter that comes after too much emotion in too little time. The more they talked, the lighter the room felt, as if someone was slowly opening all the windows inside their hearts. Imani reached for her mother's hand, and Rasha squeezed it in return without letting go. The anger that had felt so huge a few hours earlier now seemed thin, almost silly, compared to the love sitting between them. They talked about the day, about the past, about how hard it is to love someone so deeply that sometimes fear and frustration try to speak louder than kindness. When they finally finished their tea, the night had grown quiet around them, but inside they felt something settle into place. They hadn't only forgiven each other, they had remembered each other. And as they sat there, leaning slightly closer than before, they knew the fight hadn't broken anything. If anything, it had made the bond between them stronger, like clay that becomes tougher after it survives the fire.